Welcome to the InvestFourMore Real Estate Podcast. My name is Mark Ferguson, and I am your host. I am an active real estate investor. I flip 15 to 30 houses a year. I've got residential and commercial rental properties. I'm an agent with 9 people on my real estate team who've sold thousands of houses over the years. And I talk about what's going on in my career, as well as interview other amazing agents, investors, landlords, flippers, wholesalers, and companies who can help those people succeed. So I want to give a quick shout out to my sponsor, Patch of Land. They funded a flip for me in 6 days. I emailed them on a Sunday afternoon. They responded in less than 15 minutes. They have rates below 8%, work in 45 states, will fund 85% of a deal, and fund the repairs as well. Great company who I love working with, Patch of Land. And for my podcast listeners, I have a special discount page for my products, InvestFourMore.com/discount. That's InvestFourMore.com/discount. We've got coupons on all my coaching programs. Some of those programs involve calls with me, consulting, video training, and much, much more. All right, let's get to the show. Hey, it's Mark, and today we have an awesome guest for the show, Sen Morrissey, who is with Chicagoland Realty Group Partners. I'm excited to talk to Sen because he started his own brokerage, has 23 rental properties of his own, and he also manages, I think he had told me, 180 properties for other clients as well. So I know it's exciting managing properties in Chicago with the tenant laws, and I think Sen has a lot of similar characteristics to myself as far as being a broker, an agent, an investor. So Sen, thank you so much for being on the show. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And we're just talking about the weather a little bit. It's cold and snowy here in Colorado. Sounds like it's not a whole lot better in Chicago, but hopefully things get better.
Yeah, those slowly melting. So yep. Getting there.
I always like to start out my shows, just get some history and background on you. How did you first get into real estate?
Let's see. It was back in 2001. So, I mean, boy, we're talking 16, 17 years ago. I actually went out to dinner one day with my dad and kind of went over with me the tax advantages of owning investment real estate. And my parents weren't real estate moguls or anything of that nature, but that kind of sparked a flame that led to a few books, like so many of your listeners, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad about 15 years ago, and then purchased my first investment property back in 2003. So, I'm pushing 14, 15 years of being in the business.
Very nice. That's funny. I started in 2001 with my dad, who was an agent. So that's interesting.
Dads are good like that.
Yep. What were you doing at that time? Did you have like a corporate job or what was your work?
Yeah, I graduated with a bachelor degree in restaurant management. I went to the Peace Corps. I lived in Western Kenya for some time. And then when I came back, I started off in restaurant management. And, within the first year of doing that was when I had that conversation with my dad. So I feel blessed to have had it. And, ultimately it's gotten me going in the right direction, I'd like to think.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it can be a little crazy managing restaurants with everything that's going on.
Too much work, too little money, frankly.
Right. That's kind of what I've heard. If you own the restaurant, it might work out okay. But
yeah, the whole other ball of wax. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to go from the restaurant management? Did you go from there straight into real estate or were some things in between? How'd your career progress?
Yeah, so it was kind of a slow transition. I mean, like I said, I bought my first rental property in 2003 and then another in 2004. And then I ended up buying a property in 2007, 2008. So I got a little bit caught up in the bubble, but fortunately I was able to manage all that. And I ended up getting my real estate license back in early 2007 and kind of made a slow transition from being a part-time real estate agent to a full-time real estate agent, which was in May of 2009. So, back in those days, I was a Keller Williams agent here in the Chicagoland area in the western suburbs. And, more than anything, I think that experience gave me a good framework for understanding the rules of engagement when it comes to real estate agency. But, what made me a little bit different, I feel, is that ultimately I was an agent, but with an investor focus, meaning that I'm an investor first and agent second. I kind of look at real estate agency as a job and real estate investment as a pathway out of the rat race, frankly. So, I was fortunate enough to do that from 07 to 09. Really, my focus during those days when homes weren't selling at all were to use my landlord experience to help homeowners that needed to take that job relocation and didn't want to take cash to closing or didn't want to short sale or foreclose on their home. So really what we did is we helped a lot of homeowners rent their property so that at least they had some cash flow coming in and they can kind of float the boat until the economy came back. Now, that eventually transitioned into property management in the early part of 2010. And by October 2011, I ended up leaving that Keller Williams brokerage and opening up my own brokerage because there was just such a demand for property management at that time. And, it's funny. I mean, looking back, I could have done so much more if I just understood even more so the scope and the magnitude of the people that needed help at that time. It's really pretty amazing.
Wow. So that is, yes, quite a transition you made. I would love to talk a little bit more about being a part-time agent to full-time agent. Because I have a ton of people who listen to me who are on my blog, who are kind of in the corporate world, want to get out of it, are looking for that pathway to become a full-time real estate investor. And I think kind of like you did, being an agent is kind of like a nice little way to quicken that process more because you're involved in the business. Do you think it was advantageous to be a part-time agent for a while, or do you wish you would have just jumped into it all at once?
Well, it's funny looking back. I mean, I was still single in those days without kids, things of that nature. So could I have done it? Probably. Would it have been comfortable? Not at all. And, I'm kind of a podcast junkie these days. And, what I pull from so many folks, and myself included in the story, was at that time, I ended up hating my job so much, for lack of a better word, that it gave me the passion to want to transition out as soon as possible. Now, having said that, in order to go from 0 to 60, right, as a real estate agent, you've got to have a niche. I mean, that's probably the easiest way looking back to make it happen. To either go from nothing to full-time or part-time to full-time, you've got to have some kind of niche and meet the market need. And, fortunately, back in those days, I had that niche based on previous experience as a landlord per se and as a real estate investor. But what's evolved from that is, in this day and age, especially in the Chicagoland area, is a lot of competition when it comes to property management because there's just so much that grew out of that economy, 7-8 years ago. It's led to some different opportunities for us, but at the same time, it also has led to a lot of challenges because there's a lot of competition this day and age when it comes to property management here locally. So you got to change with the market, right?
Yep, exactly. I've had a lot of change in my career as well. One last thing on the transition. When did you get to a point where you felt comfortable saying, hey, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to go full-time into real estate? Was it like, were you making a certain amount of money? Did you have enough passive income from your rentals? What was it that triggered that transformation?
Yeah, so ironically, it was not passive income. It was more or less looking at my books over the last 18 months and saying, hey, I'm bringing in enough commission income to where I could provide for myself and at that time my fiance or soon-to-be wife because we got married in May of 2009. So it was kind of a nice transition point. So that was it for me. Now, naturally, I think it's easier to take these chances when you don't have a family, but the mechanics behind it are kind of the same, right? I mean, you're either looking at passive income or regular monthly income to justify that big step. And I think if folks start to do that, it'll be a much easier transition rather than just jumping in the water and saying, hey, I'm going to learn how to swim.
Right. Nope, that makes sense. Now, with the property management, I, have managed my own rentals, but I've never gotten into the business of managing other people's rentals. What kind of drew you into that niche? What was attractive to that for you?
What was kind of funny was, back in 2010, I didn't have any intent of getting into property management. I was frankly scared of managing other people's properties. But I had enough clients approach me saying, hey, Sean, I live in, Seattle now, and I've got this property in the Chicagoland area or Phoenix and whatnot. I got this property in the Chicagoland area. I need your help. Where I was like, hey, there's a market here. And looking back, that door opened for me probably in 2008, and I was just too blind to see it. But at the end of the day, it was really that client base that came to me and said, hey, Sean, we need your help. Can you do this for us? And, I was able to put together the systems, talk to enough property managers to know kind of where I was at on the playing field, and then ultimately, made the jump. And, we went from 0 to 30 properties probably in the first 6 months. We were a member of some different organizations at that time, so we ended up managing some properties, some foreclosures for Fannie Mae at that time, where, homeowners that ultimately collected rent and stopped paying the mortgage. Fannie Mae had such a supply of those, And if they were to put them on the market, it would have, prices would have been dragged down at the sale end that much more. So we ended up managing those properties for them. So there was just a lot of opportunity that kind of fell into my lap, where by 2012, it was funny looking back. Phone was ringing and I was just taking appointments left and right. And, folks would be like, hey, where do I sign? Because there just wasn't a good supply of property managers at that time in the Chicagoland area. So kind of was fortunate enough, again, to meet the market at the right time.
Very nice. And if you don't mind talking about it, how would you structure your fees and how did you charge people for that management?
So what made us a little bit different was I initially approached it from an a la carte standpoint, and we would charge based on a percentage of monthly rent. So for instance, back in those days, it was really rent collection was 4% of monthly rent, handling repair and maintenance calls would be 2% of monthly rent. And if you wanted a quarterly inspection performed on your property, it would also be 2% of monthly rent. So we left it up to the homeowner to say, all right, based on the services charged, you pick and choose what you think is necessary for you, and then ultimately we'll build our plan around that. Now, there's naturally with any system, there's some headaches, but the headache with that kind of concept is that you are customizing a plan for each individual property. So if you wanted to scale your business out, now all of a sudden you'd be like, oh, but wait, we're not collecting rent for them, but we are for them, or we're not handling repair calls for them, but we are for them. So there's some certain hiccups there, but it made for a unique niche in the marketplace at that time. Now, eventually what happened is we got, such a level of homes managed to where we were able to cut down the fleet fees and simplify things, where we said, all right, in a single family home for $100 a month, we'll handle rent collection or repair and maintenance. And then anytime you want us to do an inspection, we'll charge a separate fee for that. And, the management fee would be less for a condo or townhome, and it would be even less if we were managing a multifamily property. So at the end of the day, it was really the more properties you give us to manage, the less it's going to cost per property, just based on a scale level. And a system that works pretty well this day and age, but again, there's a lot of competitors out there. So I wouldn't tell anybody, listen, jump into property management today. I would probably say, look for investment opportunities in your own marketplace first, because there's a lot out there, regardless of location.
Right. No, that makes sense. And one thing why I haven't jumped into property management myself is it seems like you do really have to scale to make decent money.
Exactly.
How many units do you think you'd have to have for it to be worthwhile for you to manage properties for other people?
I would say if we dipped below 100, I would just say this isn't worth it. And keep in mind, one of the things that I've done all along is I would frankly discriminate based on the quality of home we're taking. So if somebody calls me and says, hey, I have an issue with the tenant, we'll talk to them and we'll see what we can do to help out. But if I show up at the property and I see a roof that's fallen off, if I see siding that's fallen off, windows, and the place is falling apart, that's going to eat up that management fee in 1 week of that particular month, right? So you've got to find properties that are self-sustaining, and tenants that are going to take good care of the property. And if you could do that, your ability to scale is astronomical. And with the sale market doing as well as it has throughout our nation, the quality of tenant isn't necessarily what it was 7 years ago, because the folks that went through foreclosure have already bought, right? That were already good homeowners. And the great properties, the ones that were cared for, are already owner-occupied. So you really got to be careful in regards to the type of property you pick up, especially this day and age, because it can suck money from your pocket or put money in your pocket. You gotta determine where that's going to be.
No, that makes a lot of sense. One other question on the property management side, are you doing a lot of work yourself, or have you delegated most of it to other people to take care of it?
Yes, our office, I have a staff of 4. At one point we managed about 200 properties in the western suburbs of the Chicagoland area, which, compared to other managers, isn't huge. But at the same time, my desire to scale to 1,000 units wasn't there. And there's a few reasons for that. One is I like to have my hand in what I'm working with and have a certain control factor there. And part of that is just from a liability aspect, right? So, I've talked to property managers that manage, 2,000 units, great. Naturally, I think, how did you scale to make that happen? Well, in the process of scaling to make that happen, they also have fair housing lawsuits and all sorts of issues with properties because of the fact they weren't there every day, or they weren't playing in the game. They were trusting on other people to take care of that. So, that wasn't an arena I was necessarily interested in, but certainly having, 4 employees, I've got my finger on the pulse of what's going on. We run a smooth organization. And, the other part of property management we really haven't talked about yet is just how technology has made everything more efficient on a property management perspective to where even, landlords that probably have 10, 15 units, properties per se, I mean, they can manage those on their own this day and age without the need of a property manager, in my opinion. I mean, you may be able to scale to even larger than that without a property manager if you're local, just based on a technological standpoint of, just what's available on the internet this day and age. So that's some exciting stuff too.
Yeah, no, it's definitely changed a lot from rent collection to screening tenants to so many different things. I mean, one thing I really want to talk to you too about was Chicago. So I've heard a lot of horror stories about tenant laws there, about evictions, about how hard it is to manage properties in Chicago. Is it that bad there, or is those stories overblown?
Well, let me put a few things in perspective. First of all, Chicago is a pro-tenant market. And frankly, our office, we're located about an hour west of Chicago proper, an hour's drive west. And we do try to stay out of the city of Chicago because of some of the pro-tenancy aspects of the city itself. Now, once you get outside of the city of Chicago or Cook County, ultimately the tenancy laws are much more relaxed. So, Aurora, Illinois is located in the county of Kane County. And frankly, Kane County, DuPage County, Will County, kind of the collar counties, we really haven't had any issues when it comes to evicting a tenant for any unreasonable term. But when you're in the city of Chicago, I mean, you need to pay interest on security deposit. You've got to make sure you're supplying notice in a proper manner. It becomes, you got to be much more detail oriented. So while there's a ton of opportunity for managing properties or even purchasing and investing in the city of Chicago, that's something you want to sit down and talk to an attorney about that's really specialized in evictions or real estate, generically, is how the city of Chicago systems or Cook County systems are going to impact your business based on the level in which you want to invest. So certainly, I can maybe give some ideas here and there. It's one of those things where I put the disclaimer of talk to an attorney first.
Right. How long, can you give an estimate of just like how long you think it would take to do an eviction in like Chicago, in Cook County?
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, so, frankly speaking, we haven't done an eviction within Cook County. And that part of that is because we screen tenants well, but the other part of it is because we stay out of Chicago proper. Now, in the collar counties, I've seen it as little as 45 days. I've seen it as much in Will County to, what was that? That was roughly 5 to 6 months. And that was an eviction where it was kind of a fun one where when the tenant pulled out, he hit the sheriff's car with his moving truck. The sheriff went ballistic on him. So that was fun. But yeah, at the end of the day, those collar counties, I'm not necessarily worried about. The city of Chicago, you got to be much more detail-oriented on. And if you followed the rules of Cook County, I'm confident you could probably get an eviction done in under 90 days, but you just got to be detail-oriented in the process. That would be my food for thought.
Okay. No, that helps. I know there's a lot of turnkey companies and companies selling rentals in Chicago, and I think that's something people should be aware about of the difficulties and making sure you have a really good property manager in place if you do go that route.
Exactly. Because, your scalability is all based on how strong your operations are and then the location and numbers of what you're buying. So certainly do your due diligence when you're looking at who's managing your property. That's the name of the game.
Yep. And speaking of the tenants and different evictions, I know you want to talk about this a little bit, but what have you guys done or learned over the years to find those good tenants and screen tenants?
Our process went from one that was entirely paper-oriented 10 years ago to one that's entirely online now. And again, this kind of touches on what I was talking about before with how technology actually helps you scale. So, one of the websites I'm a big fan of right now is rentapplication.net. And through that website, they're a Chicago-based company, actually. You could build out your own rental application. Tenants take a picture and they upload their last month of pay stubs. They run a credit, criminal, eviction background check for $40 an adult. And it's basically a one-stop shop. I mean, the issue we were having for years and years is I'd have a tenant apply for a property and I get the application on one day. And then a week later, I get the pay stubs. And then 2 weeks later, I get the credit report. And by that point, I'm like, well, I don't even remember who you are or what you were applying for. So it was, frankly, a disaster. So we tend to send folks to that website, get it all done, and then in their cloud, the application will actually be stored for a significant amount of time. I can't remember what it is. It's a few years. But, naturally, you want to download it, keep it in a secure folder for whatever reason you might pertain to. And, that itself is the way things should go this day and age. Now, in terms of what we look for in a qualified tenant, ideally, when it comes to income, it's going to be 3 times the rent amount in monthly net income. When it comes to credit score, ideally we like to see a 625 or higher, but scores can vary for all sorts of reasons, right? So we're going to want to dig into that report and really make sure that they've made on-time payments for any card or any credit line they may have over the last 12 months. And if there's a bankruptcy on there, it's not going to be an immediate disqualification, but ultimately we're going to want to make sure they've had enough time to get back on track, right? So there's a little more flexibility there per se, but when folks ask me with credit score, I always tell them 625 or higher. Eviction, naturally no eviction. And I can't tell you the number of times that we've talked to folks that have had an eviction on their background, and then ultimately they come back to us and say, oh, that wasn't me, or oh, I can explain that. And if you want to do your due diligence and seeing if that person's telling the truth or not, more power to you. But, more often than not, there's already a line of 5 applicants applying for our rentals. So we tend to be next man up, and we'll take a look at that. And then when it comes to criminal background, that's going to be a felony nationwide criminal background check. Ideally, we'd like to see nothing on that report, but you're going to have to determine as a landlord what you think is your cutoff point. So you might see somebody with a DUI and you're okay with that as an acceptable tenancy measure. If you see somebody with domestic abuse or, God forbid, murder or something, that could be a huge red flag per se. So you'll have to make your own call there. One of the things that makes the Chicagoland area a little bit different is that different villages have their own, let's just call it rental restrictions, right? So for instance, in the city of Aurora, we have to register our rental property with the village at $90 a year. They require you as a landlord to run criminal background checks on everyone over the age 18. And then there's an addendum that landlord and tenant signs, which basically gives the police department a little bit of leverage if for some reason there's criminal activity happening in that property. So, certainly in the Chicagoland area, and I'm confident other areas of the country have evolved to this, you're going to want to check with your local municipality and just make sure you're abiding by their rules, because if you don't, there's typically huge fines associated to that. That can be scary. So.
Cool. Yeah, no, I don't know if I should say luckily, but we don't have any registrations really here in Colorado yet that I know of. But I know, yes, quite a few other areas of the country do require you register rental properties or even vacant houses. Like I used to be an REO broker where I'd list HUDs and different foreclosures. And in some areas of the country, you had to register every single vacant house with the county so they knew about it. So yes, there's a lot to think about for sure.
Yeah, that vacant house measure is something that's evolved out here as well. And again, it seems to be another money maker for the municipality. You just got to make sure you're on top of it as a broker or landlord.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Well, awesome information on the property management in your company. I guess one thing I'd like to touch on too is your personal investing. I know you mentioned you had 23 properties now. Do you have any goals, or what's your plan with your personal investing?
Yeah, it's funny. When I got started, in 2003, I told myself I'm going to own 10 properties in 10 years, right? So by 2013, I think I owned 5 properties because, just kind of the tailspin in the economy. And then from 2013 on, it's been awesome. So, I'm up to 23 properties and, what'll be 15 years in June. So I've kind of met my goal once again. I'm closing on a 16 unit in a few weeks here. So really, my goal is pretty much what so many of your listeners, I'm sure, are trying to meet. And that's using regular rental income cash flows to pay for their day-to-day lifestyle. And, I'm just about there. 2018, my goal is to be there. And then from there, I haven't quite figured it all out, but in terms of generic goals, I'd like to get into some real estate syndication activity or partnerships, specifically with folks that have expressed interest in investment for years and years and, might be tied up with their W-2 job and, are looking for that pathway out. I'd love to do that. And at the same time, start to give back, right? So, I kind of live by the mantra, first you do, then you teach, then you serve. And that's kind of how I see my life evolving. So all in good time, right? Day by day.
Very cool. You said you're buying the 16 unit. Were your other 23 properties, were they a mix of single family, multifamily? What are those like?
Really a mix of single family and condominium townhomes. So the advantage, I'm more of a multifamily guy this age. But, initially when I got started, I wasn't so much like that. It was pretty much just like, what's the popular term this day and age is house hacking, right? What's the best way to get me into this investment property with the least amount of money out of pocket and still have a positive cash flow? And that was my initial thought. About 4 years ago, I started learning about commercial financing, right? Because everybody hits their limit with Freddie and Fannie, and they're looking for the next way out. And really, man, that was one of those things. If you're a new investor, I'd say talk to a commercial banker and start to learn those products, because I feel that has opened up a world of opportunity for me. And then just having the ability to be a third-party property manager and manage 200 properties at one point, I have all the confidence in the world of, growing my own inventory, bringing it up to 100 units, scaling it with technology, and ideally having the world be my oyster. So I guess that's what I'm busy doing.
Cool. Very cool. And you spoke about 100 units. I was just going to ask you, what are your future plans right now? Are you looking to kind of grow the brokerage? It doesn't sound like you want to grow property management right now. What is your goals for your personal investing, or what are you looking at to do in the future?
Yeah, really my goal is personal investing and really being more of a commercial real estate broker here locally in the Chicagoland area, using multifamily as the niche and using, our property management skill set as the niche. What's funny is, I feel like there's a lot of folks that want to get into, let's say, real estate syndication, right? And they'll be the capital raising guy or the deal finding guy, but then they have to outsource the property management. And that's one of the things I think we can do here locally, where we can be the deal finding guy, the capital raising guy, and do all the property management in-house. And I feel that could give us an interesting opportunity. And it's, something I'm working on going into 2018. But I will say, as I'm sure in your market as well, multifamily is just red hot. So where the numbers at this point, I'm just shaking my head and saying, wow, I don't know how somebody's asking this price and expecting that the buyer make money. But, you just got to find that off-market deal or that motivated seller to have it all make sense. So that's really what we've been doing is really targeting more off-market multifamily landlords that are on the smaller scale, that have ideally owned their building for, let's say, 15, 20 years and taken advantage of the depreciation aspects, and ideally will have every incentive in the world, ideally, to sell at that point and cash out. So, yeah, that's what we're currently working on.
Yeah, no, it's very tough here as well for multifamily. And I bought 16 rentals from 2010 to 2015, and they're all single family, because even back then in Colorado, multifamily has always just been super expensive here. So I made more money with single family rentals than I would have with multifamily, but now it's even worse. It's just crazy. Yeah,
it is crazy. And it's one of those things where you can look at the secondary markets to some degree, or just looking at different forms of real estate investment. And, again, for us locally, it's targeting the off-market stuff and trying to use a line of credit to purchase those properties. So yeah, we'll see where it goes this year. Fun stuff.
Nice. Very cool. Well, I guess one last question I had for you, something that I know has been super helpful to me, is how important do you think it has been to your personal investing to have your real estate license?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's funny, going back to 2006, I originally got my license because I thought, it's going to make me a better investor, right? I'm going to have access to the multiple listing service here locally. I'm going to know what's on the market. And at that time, that made sense. Now, this day and age, the multiple listing service, in my opinion, is basically Realtor.com and Zillow, right? So information has just gotten to be more and more available to the consumer. So because of that, you don't necessarily need your license to get access to properties that are on the MLS. And I can lead into a whole other discussion of, where a real estate agency might go in the next 20 years with technology and having information available. But, you can use those as tools locally to find the MLS deals. What I would do, and again, this is kind of where our current marketplace is at, I would go after the off-market deals. And that's finding folks that, have a motivation to sell fairly soon. And that can cover a whole gamut of different individuals. And you really got to target, where you want that to be based on where you're comfortable investing. But that's, if I was somebody that did not have a license, I wouldn't necessarily go out and chase the real estate license unless I planned on making a career out of it. I would really focus on finding the off-market deals. I think that's where we're at here locally.
Nope, that makes a lot of sense. Well, Sean, like I said, I think that was the last question I had for you. Anything else you want to mention or talk about that we didn't go over?
The only other thing I'd mention is I launched a podcast just a few months back called Landlording for Life. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on Stitcher. And really what we're looking for is helping the mom and pop landlord find better tools to sharpen their system. So if you go to iTunes and search Landlording for Life, you'll find it there. And, I hope you enjoy the material. We've worked hard at it. So, hopefully it'll be a valuable resource for folks.
Very cool. And then I suppose if somebody wanted to help from an agent in your area, they could always contact you as well for that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out our website. It's Chicago-Realty-Group.com. All our stuff is on there, from podcasts to turnkey real estate investment to helping buyers and sellers and property management. So yeah, certainly reach out if there's anything we could do to help you out wherever you're at, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Awesome, Sean. Well, really appreciate you being on the show. A lot of great information. Sounds like you've done very well and been smart about your investing and your business as well with what you take on and don't take on. And yeah, I learned a lot myself. And thanks again for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Cool. No, we'll have your contact information in the show notes so people can check that out and get links to all of your stuff. And then, hopefully things keep going well for you. And like you said, spring comes soon in Chicago.
Yeah. Only in a few months. And before we know it, baseball will be here.
That's right. Cool. Well, thanks again, Sean. Really appreciate it. And we'll have to keep in touch here for sure.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a great day.